Knowledge articles are basically a garden, and AI is the reason that you really need to be good at writing and how not to write articles that suck. We're going to talk about this and so much more today with Leslie O'Flahaven. How you doing, Leslie? Let's get into it.
Let's get into it right now. I'm happy to be here.
On today's episode of Bytes and Banter, we're joined by Leslie O'Flahaven, who is the owner of eWrite. It's a writing consulting company. How you doing today, Leslie?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to talk to you.
I'm so excited to have you on. You are someone that I've heard a lot about and got the chance to talk a little bit about what you do and, your journey and writing is, your passion and what you talk to people about and help people grow in it. And so before we dive into the good meaty stuff with writing, which is critical, right, in IT support and technology as a whole, how in the world did you fall into this whole idea, this business of let me help people learn how to write more effectively for business? Like, how did that come to be?
Well, it's kind of a long journey and a short journey because I started my career as a high school English teacher and as a college writing teacher. So, in that sense, short journey. But in another sense, very, very long journey because I have a very deep respect and fondness for people who have had no preparation to meet the writing demands of their jobs. It's different if you're a student in school, you expect teachers to help you all day long. But if you're a person who's a support analyst, no one's really preparing to help you become a better writer. And that's very moving to me. I think everyone deserves help acquiring the skills they need to do their job.
I love that. Finding a need that is so practical, right? And it's really bridging a gap. And I think you're trying to think about my history in the IT support world. It's been a decade since I joined this industry, but you're right. Even then, no one taught me how to write, whether it's in my emails that I was doing when we had email support or chats or even my tickets. Nobody really explained how do you write. So that brings me to my initial question when it comes to writing. Is a good writer someone that is naturally born that way, maybe their passions, things they enjoy, or can you really make somebody a good writer?
Yes, you can make someone a good writer. I believe this to my core. You can't always make someone an elegant writer. You can't always make them a persuasive writer. You can't force anyone to be a willing writer, but you can reduce the obstacles to writing well substantially so that people who were reluctant become more willing. But I believe that writing well is a learned skill, and barring and I'll be funny later, but I'm not being funny now. Barring any real neurological differences or illness, people can become better writers and they can meet the writing needs of their job. If they can meet all the other needs of their job, if they can do all the other things their job requires, we can help them become competent at their work.
Interesting. I think writing for me, like I started writing stories, Leslie, believe it or not, one of my goals in life is to have the freedom time at some point to write a book, right? I don't know if that's a novel, I don't know if that's like a leadership book, and but I started writing when I was middle school and stories about going to a card shop and buying baseball cards. And my world's very different now, and as is most of our listeners, right, aren't middle schoolers who are writing. So as we become adults, as we join the professional workplace and definitely in the technology world, what are some challenges that prevent somebody from being an effective writer?
I think challenges are lack of purposeful, predictable, and scaffolded learning opportunities. I think that's the biggest challenge. I think also bosses or leaders, managers often think, hey, if this person is good at A, this person will also be a good writer. That's really true in our world, in the support analyst world, because Many times support analysts are just great on the phone. And so their bosses think this person is rock solid. Let's put this person, let's give this person 6 simultaneous chats to answer. And the language skills that make people great on the phone are not the same language skills that make them great in writing. We can
Mm,
loom those writing skills, those language skills, but they're not the same. What makes you great on the phone is the ability to listen analytically. And what makes you great in writing is the ability to read analytically, and they're not the same. There's also kind of a skewed population, people who are willing to do their jobs on the phone, like some support analysts, willing or eager to do their jobs on the phone, often select that method because they dislike writing. Why do they dislike writing? Well, they may have language related learning disabilities. They may be really super smart. They're great listeners. They're good communicators, but they're not good writers. They're coping with dyslexia or something like that. And we take that person and say, here's an inbox for you. It reminds me of that poor woman in the Rumpelstiltskin story. They said, go in the closet, make the straw into gold. It's
yeah.
really hard.
Oh man. Yeah, I think it's the challenges that you don't think about, right? When you're assigning tasks, and definitely people who are early in their career, and you don't want to say no to an opportunity, right? And it can be hard to step up and say no, like, hey, I don't think this is a good fit. Here's why. So let's talk about really the bread and butter in the world that we know of IT support, and that is knowledge bases, right? It's you live and die by your knowledge unless you're an analytical thinker or you're in a startup and you don't have a knowledge base, right? And I lean towards Leslie just transparently. I want my people, definitely at the service desk level, to be able to focus on the person they're serving, which means I need the writing and the knowledge to give them what they need to be successful. So, walk me through from a knowledge base perspective, how do you write an effective knowledge base article? Like, what does that look like?
Well, an effective knowledge base article is built on the writer's ability to anticipate the reader's questions about, or the user's questions about that topic. So it's not so much what I want to tell you about this topic. It's my knowledge that you will have questions and I need to answer them. So already it's reader centric or user centric, not writer centric. So that's the first thing. Can I imagine my user well enough? Do I know my user well enough that I can anticipate what they're going to ask? That's kind of the Adam and Eve of good quality self-service content. Did the person who
Mhm.
produced the content know what I was going to ask about the topic? And now, if you want to do it now or later, it's up to you. I could talk about some much narrower writing practices that make articles good and the absence that makes them bad.
Yeah, no, I think let's dive into that. That's why we brought you on, right? It's something we haven't really talked a lot about. I think, and you hit it on the nail on the head, Leslie. In our world in IT support, self service is becoming so much more beneficial and so much more, in the forefront of everybody's mind because of that little thing called AI, right? AI is, whether or not people realize this, AI is only as good as the source of data that it's pulling from, which means the tips you're about to share are critical for any IT organization that wants to leverage their knowledge to drive self service. So take us away, Leslie. Let's dive into it.
All right, so here we go. So to write a great knowledge base article, one thing is you address the user as you. Don't write about users, don't write about customers, address the reader as you, which is such a tiny little writing choice. It's I'm starting with a word swap. But the overall question that people have when they use knowledge articles is this for me? Does it show me what to do? So that little pronoun you really matters a lot. That's my first suggestion. We always write a really strong title, usually one that includes a verb, because the verb is the part of speech that describes what you're doing. And knowledge articles, some of them, a rare set, are about just knowing stuff, but most of them are about doing stuff. So
Hmm.
instead of login process, that's a lousy knowledge article title, it would be how to log in, right? So we get we treat login as a verb, not as an adjective for
Hmm.
a process.
So I'm gonna pause you because you're breaking my brain right now, Leslie, just transparently. I've been in the world for a long time, for a decade of my life, and I don't think I've ever seen a knowledge article that, number one, used you.
Oh, yes, you have.
Uh,
You have.
I, if I have, I haven't recognized it.
All the Microsoft they use you.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. So
yeah.
maybe I'm just overlooking that little nuance, which is totally okay. So
Actually, it's cool that you didn't recognize it. I would theorize here that it sounded natural enough that you didn't recognize it, and that's
yeah.
good. We no one. I mean, I'm a giant word nerd, but nobody else is like rather. They seem to be using the pronoun
Ooh.
you. No one says that. They just notice whether the content's easy to use or difficult to use.
You better believe I'm gonna go dig into Microsoft's KBs here after we get off our call and say, let me catch that. So I love that. And now the second piece is the action related headline as a best practice, and I would love to know like kind of how that drives the search and the metadata that might pop up, because I do feel like a lot of times the way you see a KB structured is what is your error,
Hmm.
right? What is the application impacted? What's the error message? It's
Right.
not action driven. So
Right.
why is that?
Well, you're making a really good point. I would say when the knowledge article writer has a lot more information and technical knowledge than the knowledge article user or reader, that verb is much more important. But when we're
Mm,
writing knowledge articles where the writer and the person who'll read or use the article are parallel, they're on the same level with their technical knowledge, the verb is less important.
and that probably very much depends on your team, your organization, right? And who's actually writing your articles.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the
So
article
that's
outward facing or is it internal only?
no, that's super, super good. I'm already learning a ton. Let's keep going. Go down number three. What's number three?
Three is the article should have a precious piece of real estate right at the top, right under the title of the article that talks about the outcome of following the steps. And sometimes this is torture to write because if you're saying how to enroll a new user, then you have to write in this little bottom line up front block I'm describing. You have to write at the end of this process, you'll be able to enroll a new user, which sometimes makes you feel stupid or angry that you have to spend the precious moments of this life we have writing that. But with a little bit of finesse on it, or a little bit of mentioning the conditions that might affect how easy or difficult it is to enroll a user or user types, that little block becomes much as valuable as it truly is. So if you sit there and like, I'm going to write how to enroll, that you'll be able to enroll a new user. But if you continue writing one who is on campus or one who is a remote learner, or you could say one who has dual credentials or one who has single credentials. And now that little overview, that bottom line up front paragraph is really doing its job.
I'm thinking about all the different places where, just like you're talking about, how that would give the reader, even if it's like a technical analyst, not self service,
Right.
enough information to know they're in the right place before they have to go looking for it.
Right. So you're doing the mental work that is required to be a great knowledge article writer. You're imagining the user, right? And one of the user's questions is, am I in the right place? As in, did my search terms and the search engine land me where I need to be? But the other one, let's admit it right now, the other question people are always asking is, how much of this mountain do I have to scale? Like, can I not read this whole thing? How much of this can I skip? And it's not because they're stupid, hateful, or lazy. That is not the reason why. It's because even users that are looking for the same information, they differ from each other and they differ from the amount of experience they have with the task they're trying to complete or the outcome they're trying to cause. And so they actually do need different amounts, less or more of information. It's our job to make it easy for them to figure out how much they need.
My natural inclination, and this is just how I operate, is to think with the user in mind, and or the consumer or the customer. There's this trend in our industry of the word user, and Alan Nance is an advocate, if you know who he is, for
Yeah.
not using that word, and it's hard to break, right? But the consumer of the product, the consumer of the knowledge, the consumer of the service, that's where my brain goes. So naturally, I'm thinking about their story and their journey, right? That user journey through the knowledge and how they're accessing it. Is it easy to find? Did I find the right place? Can I find the right things? So all of this makes so much sense when you kind of break it down, right? And why we do it. So what's next on that list?
The next thing I'd like to mention on the list is that good articles have clear and action-oriented subheadings to them. They're divided in sections. And there are two reasons. One I've already mentioned, but I'll explain the headings connected to that. And the other one is we scan this kind of information. We don't read it from top to bottom, nor should we have to. So if our reading strategy or our coping strategy is to scan the knowledge article, then we have to have scannable features. And subheadings are scannable features. So it's not like the writer can sit there and go, oh, do I feel like it? No, it doesn't matter if you feel like it or not. You need headings, meaningful headings, not process, outcome, steps. Those are meaningless headings. You need a full clause with a verb in it is the subheadings of the article. So that supports the reader's coping strategy for scanning. And just, a little tangent, a tiny little tangent, we should really respect readers' capacity to scan, because one of the big differences between high literacy readers and low literacy readers is whether they can scan information successfully. High literacy readers have this as a first strategy. They glance at the document, they see where the signposts are, their eyes move quickly from signpost to signpost to match their information hunger with what's on offer. Low literacy readers don't have that strategy. Or they don't do it successfully. They're not as good at matching the question that they brought or the terms that they brought to the content with what's on offer by looking at the signpost. So we really should respect that our well-built and strong thinking readers are going to scan.
Support World Live is just around the corner and you won't want to miss it. This May, join us as we dive into the future of service management, connect with industry leaders, and explore innovative solutions for today's digital natives. HDI members, make sure you use your discount code. And for our podcast listeners who are not members, use the promo code BYTES, BYTES, when registering to unlock special savings. So mark your calendar, pack your curiosity, and get ready to network, learn, and grow at Support World Live 2025. See you there.
I'm thinking about an SOP, right? I recently wrote a general SOP to help with something that happens pretty regularly, and it was very headline oriented. It's not a knowledge base, not the same, but I'm thinking about the reader, and I'm thinking about most of our listeners who are trying to find ways to leverage things like AI to drive efficiency. My question is, if we were to effectively, just these first few steps that you're talking about, do those, right? From a clear heading, clear subheading, like what's the outcome, and clear subheadings underneath those, how much more efficient would the support team be as opposed to trying to parse a knowledge, right? If we were effective, how much time could that save a business and ultimately the employees of the business that we're supporting?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever looked at that or if you have an answer. I'm curious, like, how does that drive efficiency in the consumer?
It's a bit of a difficult question to answer, partly because we can count knowledge articles. We can say we have 653 of them in our knowledge base, God forbid, or we have 172 of them. But we all know that counting them does not describe their merit or how frequently they're used.
Mm-hmm.
So the metrics would have to somehow account for how important is that particular article to what we do every day, or how much demand is there for that article. I've found that about 10% of what we have stored answers about 90% of our questions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely 100% agree with that, right? I think we're doing some work where I work at with machine learning and AI to look at exactly what you're talking about, like the tickets and the knowledge that was used for that tickets, and figuring out how effective was that knowledge, right? How effective were the steps that were followed to drive resolution, and can we reduce that knowledge, make it more efficient? So I do think you're spot on in terms of you might get 600 types of calls in 6 years, but most of the time, yeah, most
Right.
of the time you're right on point, right on point.
For a long time, from about 2016 to 2021, I had lots of airline clients, and every single airline client I had an email template stored about the volcano in Greenland that erupted in whatever it was, 2013, and filled the skies with ash and prevented flights going from North America to Europe. I'm like, trash it. It's 2021. The chances that that same volcano is going to erupt, those chances are poor. You just don't need it. And they just store it, till the nuclear
Yeah.
winter. They're just saving it. We don't need that article. And there's some costs to keeping it, and we should get rid of it. But that was another tangent too.
Love it. What's next? What's next on the list?
What's next on the list? Writing instructions that are easy to follow. And there are some simple and thankfully steadfast practices to writing good instructions. You number the instructions. You don't use bullets for instructions. You begin each instruction with a verb, and you wrestle those notes so that they're not getting in the way of the instruction. Notes is a type of throat clearing. It's a type of laziness in the knowledge article writers ordering the knowledge article. You say, oh, I have a thing to tell you that kind of goes with number 3. Oh, and I have another thing to tell you that you would only want to know after you do number 6. It's really burdensome. So you have to figure out where the note goes, and you have to not call it a note. Note is this, you could have like a generic off between note, information, and resource. Those are, super generic words, and they don't help very much. And so if you're typing a step and then you add a note, you can leave it in there for a hot minute while you're sorting out the rest of the thing, but then you have to go back to the note and figure out what it actually is. If it's 2 ways to accomplish the same goal, say that. If it's something you must do before you do the step, integrate it into the step somehow. But just calling something a note is easy for the writer and hard for the reader.
What does that mean? Right, such an ambiguous note.
Right.
Does that mean I need to do something different? Does that mean yeah? No, that's I think a really good point.
Right. And if you really need it to be like a little freestanding scrap of information that's like hovering between step 2 and step 3, just give it a better name. Don't call it a note. Call it 2 options, or what to do if this fails. Just say more. Note is very uninformative.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like, okay, they don't have the latest version of this application. You go this route versus, it's kind of like your GPS, right? When you're in the car and Google Maps is talking to you and you miss an exit, which we've all done at times. What do they say? Rerouting. Right? It's the same idea. I love it. It's give clear directions. When do you need to turn?
Right.
Well, you missed your exit, so now you need to go left. Makes sense.
Rerouting's better than note anyway. That's for sure.
I like it.
Yeah.
What's next?
The next tip is, if you're going to use screenshots, they have to have markup. You have to show people somewhere where to look on this thing. You can't just drop the screenshot in there, or even with the video, you need to direct their eye. And this is the reason for that is the same as the second point about headings I meant to make but didn't get around to. We know our users or our readers of our knowledge content, they change between the times they visit that particular article. They are learning all the time. And one thing that we find so actually dear, and it makes us so fond of our users and our readers, is that they'll try stuff. So they're trying to, let's say they're thinking, I need to enroll people in 3 work categories for this into this tool. And they may not look at the knowledge article first at all. So they're going to go try it, right? And then it fails. And then they go to the knowledge article. Now they're scanning, they're looking at the headings, and they may be just looking at the screenshots. And that's why we need markup there. And maybe they try what they think the piece is telling them. Maybe they're not even reading that carefully. Doesn't work again. Now they're going to come back to the article and read it. Or they succeeded with one of the 3 roles, but they couldn't sign people up who have the other 2 roles. So the reader is changing between uses of the knowledge article. And that's why signposts like headings and the markup screenshots is so important, so that we can support them as they become different.
That makes so much logical sense and just how humans interact. And, I'm thinking about my time as an agent again, just reminiscing about my default when I couldn't, if a knowledge article wasn't useful or helpful to me, right, as the consumer of that article, I did try to figure it out on my own. That might be searching for that keyword in ticket history, right? Running that report and seeing if there's anybody else. This person had this call before for this application that I know nothing about. And I do think, to your point, Leslie, we maybe don't give consumers enough credit on what they're trying to do before they go to the knowledge article and how often they change. That's a really good point.
Yeah, we celebrate them. This is a phenomenon that's true with internal communications also, like your HR team. You receive an email from them and it's going to sit in your inbox. You're going to read the subject line and you're going to say, it says about requesting vacation leave in Q2. And you don't have any plans to request vacation leave in Q2. So you don't really read it, but you don't delete it either. And then it turns out somebody invited you to their lake house for the weekend. You do want to request vacation leave. So you glanced at what the change in the process was, didn't really read it. You come back. You're not as baby naked. You're not as ignorant as you were the first time you glanced at that email, but you're not experienced either. But the content, the learning content sits there and waits for you, and you change in the interim. So all those signposts are really, really important.
I love it. Was that 5 or do we have another one?
I don't know. There's been more. I have only one more that I really want to say. And
go ahead.
Yeah, that is use a conversational tone. Because I have spent my entire professional life as the owner of eWrite, 30 years helping people learn to write better. I know what kind of baggage they carry from school, and they carry silly baggage. They should just, set it down by the side of the road. They think that contractions aren't appropriate at work, or you shouldn't address the reader as you. And this is not true. There's almost no corporate style guide I have ever seen anymore that says never use contractions. So we want to use the language. People hold an idea that appropriate business writing is very far away in tone from even business speaking. And I'm saying they're much, much closer. The way you sound in Slack and the way you sound in your knowledge articles can be closer. Not the same, because the purpose is different, but they can be closer, and they should.
It's being outcome focused, right? If I'm going to send an email, and I do this naturally because I don't know if I just tend not to overthink communication when I'm writing it.
You like writing.
I love writing. I do. I could spend my entire day writing and researching and writing about things I'm passionate about and never be tired of it. And I naturally, when I'm typing out an email, when I'm typing out an IM, or I'm typing out a post on LinkedIn, it flows how I would say it vocally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because my head to my mouth to my hands all kind of processes. I'm an external processor, maybe, and I imagine there's differences in how people process things and that kind of impacts, right? And maybe that's a part of it. And I can tell when somebody is writing similarly, right? Like you
Yeah.
just the conversational communication where it's let me have a conversation over email with you feels very different and more meaningful than let me make this professional and feel you know and I don't think I've ever realized that before this conversation is thinking about it like, oh, that's why you receive an email this way sometimes when I read it versus another way.
That's really why we want to write in a conversational tone when we're writing knowledge articles, because, I mean, I probably should whisper, but we want people to read them and go away. You know, it's not a hobby, it's a job, and we want people to read them. We want them to, I don't know, intuit that we care and that we mean to help and
Mhm.
that their success is our success, but we do want them to read it, use it, and go away. Go away with a good answer.
And you say it like that, and it totally fair. I think for me, it's all about the reality of IT support is no one is excited or eager or looks back and says, I wish I had the right answer to this problem, right? What do they say? I wish I never had the problem in the first place. So if our writing gives them the ability to bypass contacting somebody because now they have the information and like you're talking about a conversational way, a meaningful way that is digestible, easily findable, searchable, and gives them to the outcome that's labeled, right?
Right.
In that knowledge article, that's better for the organization to get them back to productive, right? Back to doing that. And, we haven't talked a lot about it on this call, but the reality is AI will thank us later for doing these things that you're talking about.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are we going to talk AI now?
Yeah, let's briefly touch on AI because I am curious to hear your sentiment around this. Right, there's a lot of I have my own thoughts, and I'm not gonna throw all of them out there because I really want to hear someone who's an expert in writing, and you've seen right. You said 30 years at E-Write. You've seen the evolution and the waves of different technology and the writing and the impact to organizations, and so I'm curious to hear how you feel this AI cycle is going to truly impact knowledge based articles as we know it, writing as we know it, and what does that mean for the technical analyst, the IT leader? Like, walk me through your perception and what you're seeing.
Well, these are giant questions, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to try to pull them in a little bit. So, well, I think our industry is in a bullshit tsunami right now when it comes to AI. And I don't want any part of that. So, what I'm going to talk about is generative AI, like GPT, Gemini, Claude, and generative AI used by an individual human writer to create or improve knowledge articles. So, taking the scope right down here, I'm not saying I'm not going to stay in my lane. I have lots of lanes, but right now we've been talking about human people creating knowledge content for human readers. And so I'm going to talk about the generative AI tool and its capacity to help us create better knowledge content or maintain what we have more easily. So, I'm an English teacher and I have been an English teacher my entire career. And my life's work is to help people I meet for a long time or a short time about whom I care a lot become better writers. So let's not make it all about me, but I need a hug. Generative AI is, in one sense, it's wrecking me. It's breaking my heart. It tore my heart out of my chest. It stomped on my heart. It's a real shift. Okay. So that's the one side. But on the other side, I have always embraced new tools for writing well, and just like no idiot says kids shouldn't use a calculator in 8th grade, no idiot says don't use spell check. That's terrible advice. Everyone should use spell check. In fact, spelling ability in growing human minds, it flatlines in middle school. So if you're smart and your writing abilities are still developing, but you're not a good speller, it's over when you're about 11 or 12. So you need to use spell check. So as a professional, I've chosen to treat generative AI as just another tool, and to let go of my fears about how it will crapify everything we write and read. That's what I'm doing. So here's the hopeful stuff. If a human person using generative AI can recognize what a good knowledge article will look like when it's finished and how it will suit its users' needs, that person can tell a generative AI tool how to edit what we have on hand to make it better. We can. The prompts aren't that hard to write. Imagine if, and some of the prompts work really well. So imagine if you have like a pretty decent, accurate knowledge article that lacks any subheadings. You can tell generative AI, add subheadings written in this style, give it an example to this article. And I've done this. It works pretty well. And you can definitely use generative AI to proofread your stuff. It's much better than Microsoft Editor. Microsoft Editor is the worst, and we should apologize to every non-native English speaker who has to use it for how bad it is. You can use generative AI to clean up the steps. So you could say, this article has 17 numbered steps. Edit it so that each step begins with a verb. You could probably get it to help you clean up the notes. But you see, there's a giant given. The giant given is that the human telling the AI what to do knows what a good knowledge article looks like and how it's built. And that's what worries me, because as a lifelong writing teacher, I know that people develop their ability to understand how writing works well by producing it themselves. And if we take that production out of the mix and all we have is evaluation, essentially, you're not going to produce this knowledge article. Someone else did, or another Gen AI tool did. Here it is. Describe how to fix it. I fear most people I know in the workplace they just won't have the capacity to describe what it needs, but willing to try.
No, I think you just echo what I'm seeing in the industry, where you see it all over. Everybody who's ever talked about AI has quoted it, said it, quoted somebody else who quoted it. AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, right? And I think naturally, there's a time in history, and I'm sure as an English teacher, you're very well aware of the time in history when people would sit down, and the main way they learned was listening for hours and hours and hours, right? And they retain that information. Well, over time, we are now readers, and like you, right? There's a serious risk, and definitely the next generation losing that critical thinking and understanding of, hey, I need to understand how to write and what I'm looking for. It's the same idea as understanding the outcome, right? If you're supporting a customer and you don't know what outcome they're trying to achieve, you don't know what value you're bringing, how do you know what's the right thing to ask? What's the right
Right.
question?
Right.
Right? Like, and I'm even thinking about, like, just as you talk about AI and leveraging AI, that the headache of formatting, the headache of, hey, if I know the best practices, I want to switch and tweak this, that becomes so much easier for organizations.
Yeah. Yes.
So much easier. AI will never replace humans and will never replace the connection that we make, right, as humans. Like you and I, Leslie, having this conversation, I could Google a lot of things and I could use ChatGPT to find a lot of things, use Gemini to find a lot of things, but those only know what they know. They don't have the ability to really have a conversation with me in a meaningful way, right? In the human connection. And even though we're on camera, looking into your eyes and understanding, oh, I can trust you, right?
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I
And
can't take that
yeah.
on. That's too big for me. I don't know what to make of will AI replace us? I think there's so many people I have met who have expressed that the way generative AI tools help them as writers relieving a lifetime of pain in writing with
Yeah.
writing. And that's probably more true in the technical support world than it is in some other worlds. If I were talking to I don't know, somebody who runs a press agency, well, that person is a little bit more likely to like to write. And people who are tech support analysts are a little bit, I'm, trying not to make sweeping generalizations, so just narrower ones. They may be a little bit less likely to like to write. And so if they can, I've seen how happy they are about these tools. I have seen they're thrilled. It looks like something they've longed for. It is here. It makes it easier. But unless they can tell whether what the tool has made is good, and they're willing to do the work to improve what the tool has made if it's not good, then we're screwed. We really are.
Yeah, so I think it makes the human skills that go into that so much more critical. I think I just, I think I saw an article on LinkedIn today. Somebody shared it that talked about the skills of the future. Right? AI and machine learning was very high. Everything else was all about analytical thinking and communication, leadership. Some things that AI can't replace: inspiration. Y- I, Quotes are inspiring when you hear them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also inspiring when you read them, right? It's Julius Randle. Have you seen Remember the Titans, Leslie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's Julius Randle, right? He's talking to Gary, his captain, who's they're integrating white black school, and Gary's going off on him on Julius, who's a fullback. It's like, what you need to tell you, or he's a wide receiver. I don't remember, but he's like, you need to tell your team they need a block for blah blah blah, and it's like, and he said something like, I'm not gonna do the blah blah, but Gary told him, he's like, that's a piss poor attitude, and if anybody's seen it, if you're like me and you remember quotes that have a really good impact, Gary or Julius responds to Gary and he says, leadership reflects attitude, captain, or attitude reflects leadership, captain, right? You can't, AI is not going to produce that moment.
Exactly.
So Leslie, I love that you're clinging on to hope and the impact and the opportunities that are there, because I'll tell you, writing and generally speaking as an art, as um, a need to improve, isn't going to go anywhere, right? Organizations that are going to try to leverage AI, we have this trend called technical debt. Like, hey, we're behind the eight ball and everything we've invested in. We need to upgrade. Well, I think we're gonna see a resurgence of debt, but it's gonna be writing debt, where our SOPs are not in a digestible format. They're missing information. We have 12 different versions on the SharePoint that anybody can find, even though they're not on the landing page, right? Or these knowledge articles haven't been touched in years. That ultimately all that's going to impact organizations' capability to leverage AI, because AI is only as
Right.
good as what's there, right? The sources. So all that rant to say, Leslie, the art of writing and what you do is bigger of a need in the tech space now than I think you realize, than I think a lot of leaders probably even realize. And it's just a matter of when they come tap on your door and knock and say, hey, help us make our knowledge digestible because we can't use AI.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Cool. Well, Leslie, anything else you want to add, whether it's about AI, knowledge articles, best practices, before I ask you one final send off question?
I think just to remind ourselves that the value of doing the work of improving knowledge content, the payoff is there. I mean, yes, we can find studies, but we just know the payoff is there. That it is incredibly time expensive to maintain a good quality knowledge base. We know it's like maintaining a garden, and we don't look outside and go like, weeds again. We have to expect them. It is time consuming and it can be exhausting. I know this, but the value is really there.
I love that. I love that metaphor. I've never heard it before, talking about knowledge, but it's on point, right? And what do they say about grass? It's not greener on the other side. Where's it greener? where it's watered, right?
Right. Right.
Your
Yeah.
knowledge is no different. I
Yeah.
love it. So,
Yeah.
Leslie, one final question I'm going to ask you that I ask every single one of our guests, and you can pick the timeline, but if you could hit rewind and talk to younger Leslie, what words of wisdom, advice, or encouragement would you give younger Leslie?
I have always been confident, hopeful person. I didn't really have a dark and scared time that I struggled through to get to a bright and light time. But I would tell myself that at the start of eWrite that the gifts and rewards of starting this company, I'd be like, girl, you don't even know how great it's going to be. That I would tell myself. I would say to myself, you think you know how the people you teach will affect you now, but you don't even know it's going to be 1,000 times better.
I love that. I love that. It's the future is better than you even realized. Embrace every moment. Leslie, thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you? Where can we follow all your recommendations, tips?
Well, definitely find me at my website, ewriteonline.com. Definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It has its baggage. It's got all those weirdos trying to sell you something you don't want. But mostly, I really like the conversations I'm having on LinkedIn. And if you connect with me or follow me, I'll be very happy about that. And once a month, usually in the third week of the month, I and my colleague Kim Sido Campbell host a LinkedIn Live broadcast called Fix This Writing. Two experts show you how to make bad writing better. And you can join us. We usually run about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. The sessions are recorded, and we always bring a real example and show a before and after. Kim is a professor of technical writing at the University of North Texas, and I am who I am, and we have great conversations. We'd love to have you join.
I love it. Leslie, thank you so much for your time. For our audience, go check out the resources and learn to be a better writer. Take this information, go write better knowledge articles, and we will catch you on the next episode of Bytes and Banter.